Meeting is being live streamed. Okay. If it says so, I believe it. Last time I missed the beginning, so I'm going to have to check it at some point. In fact, let me do that really quickly before I start the art, just to make sure that because I wound up missing a large part last time because history, Torah study, beginning. So okay, we're there. Check it. Okay, good. Okay, we're there. I even heard my nasal voice. I apologize for the sound. I blame it on COVID. So let me get one thing started here. Share using optimize for video and share this and Eikev, meaning obey. And in the Parsha, we'll read how Moses admonishes the Israelites to earn blessings by obeying the rules and keeping the covenant, and warns that turning away from them will bring down curses for generations. And there are parts of the Parsha to really sink your teeth into, literally, about food. For instance, the miraculous manna that fed them for the 40 years wandering. French-born Jacques Tissot painted this image, one of his many Torah-inspired pieces, around the end of the 19th century. The gathering of the manna shows the Israelites scooping up the heaven-sent food to sustain them for the day. The artist did much of his work in England, where he was known as James Tissot. This portrait of him, by the way, is by his French colleague Degas, when they were both young upstarts in Paris. But when he did this and most of his biblical paintings much later in life, Tissot looked more like this self-portrait. He had traveled to Egypt, the Levant, and other parts of the region, studying the styles and practices of Bedouins and other tribes, and in his paintings he seemed to assume that not much had changed in a couple of millennia, but it also gives them the authentic look that many of his works, including this one, are now in the collection of New York's Jewish Museum. Notice that in this scene, almost all of the characters have their faces hidden, except for the standing woman, who appears to be looking directly at us. He frequently used his longtime lover, Kathleen Newton, as the model, and her face shows up in much of Tissot's art. In something of a Victorian-era scandal, they lived together without being married. And when she died of tuberculosis in 1882, Tissot turned from the contemporary subjects that had made him famous to spiritual themes, and most of his biblical paintings were inspired by his grief over her loss. Eikev also includes a passage we regularly read at our services as part of the Ahavta after the Shema. Moses repeats the promise from God to provide the rain of your land in its season, early rains and late, and you shall gather in your grain and your wine and your oil. American-born Israeli artist Yoram Ranaan uses an impressionist style to portray Haaretz HaTovah, picking up on those and other lines from the Parsha, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Originally from Pennsylvania, Yoram Ranaan now lives and paints on his farm in the Judean hills near Jerusalem. And not too far away from another of our favorites, British-born Israeli artist and sculptor Darius Gilmont. Darius uses his naive art style to illustrate the Shivat Haminim, the 7 species, specifically mentioned in Eikev, the symbols of the plentiful fruits and crops that the land will yield so long as the people are faithful to the commandments. The fruits of Israel also get a colorful treatment from another English-born Israeli artist, Hannah Helen Rosenberg. She says, "Don't worry if you think the painting is upside down." She took inspiration from a line in Psalm 92, "A righteous person is like a tree with its roots in heaven." And reaching heavenward from among the wheat stalks, she shows hands offering thanks, the brachot traditionally said before eating any of the 7 species. Originally from Manchester, England, Hannah Helen Rosenberg spent a career teaching art and made Aliyah in 2006 when she retired. She now lives and works in Beersheba. From the Women of the Book, the 2015 compilation of 54 original pieces, one for each Parsha, by 54 Jewish women artists from around the world, Montreal artist Gila Yellen Hirsch turns to the Kabbalistic view with her colorful and mystical take on those fruits and crops described in Eikev.
Now, Eikev went through three iterations with me. The first was much more literal, the second much more conceptual, and finally this one, where each of the 7 foods that are mentioned in the land of milk and honey are represented by shechinot, each a different food. So from left to right, there's dates, olives, figs, pomegranates, wheat, barley, and grapes. And I envisioned them as if suddenly found in a newly discovered ancient cave, scratched into the wall by some wonderful ancestor who really understood the nature of the relationship between imagination, spirit, and concrete image and form. In this way, we get the message. We also get the permission to exercise our own imagination, entering into a time of the past and bringing it forward to our future.
That's Canadian artist Gila Yellen Hirsch with her Eikev painting for Women of the Book. Ukrainian-Israeli artist Ukrainian-born Israeli artist Alex Levin created a series of panels showing realistic, mouth-watering images of the Shivat Haminim, barley and wheat, figs, pomegranates, dates, grapes, and olives, each panel featuring an Israeli landscape where you'd find them growing today. A multimedia artist who also works in mosaic and stained glass media, Alex Levin also used those techniques for another version of the 7 species as a series of stained glass windows. Born in Kiev, he studied art in his native Ukraine, lived in the U.S. for a while, and now does his work and spends his time in Israel. The fruits are also arrayed in panels by Israeli Sabra Ofra Friedland, who uses summery colors to depict them as a tribute to the beauty she finds in the Israeli landscape.
כשאתה מוקף במה שאתה אוהב, אתה משתוקק לצייר אותו. יש כאן המון מורכבויות ומשמעויות, ואי אפשר להתעלם מזה, זה מופיע בכל מקום. המגע עם משהו שהוא כל כך מורכב ועמוק, מפעיל ומגרה את כל החושים, ואני משתוקקת לחסות את כל המהות הזו. אני גם מאוד מחוברת לצמחייה המקומית. אני זוכרת איך בתור ילדה קטנה הייתי חוזרת כל קיץ הביתה עם ידיים סרוטות מהקוצים ומהסברס שניסיתי לכתוב. לאורך שנים אני מציירת עצים עתיקים בארץ ישראל, וזו עבודה שתימשך כנראה כל ימי חיי. כל יום אני יוצרת, ותוך כדי עבודה אני נפגשת במראות, בחומרים, באנשים, האנשים מתרגשים ואני מתרגשת מהם. היצירה מחברת. בעצם מהרגע שבו חלקתי אותה עם העולם מתחילה החוויה.
Jaffa native Ofra Friedland works in glass, oils, ceramics, and textile design at her studio in Jerusalem, and that's the art for this take on Eikev, and also we should acknowledge Tu B'Shvat this past week, the new year for the trees.
I thought Tu B'Shvat was, it's not, I don't think it's not Tu B'Shvat. This past week was Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av, oh.
Right.
My mistake. Thank you for correcting me. Thank you.
I thought, wow, I'm really disoriented. Right, because we're in the month of Av, and after Tisha B'Av, a few days later, is the 15th of Av, which is known as the holiday of love, or it's considered the Israeli Valentine's Day, so the focus is love. I don't know much about it. It's some tradition that I wasn't aware of and has never really made its way into my consciousness. I don't actually know what's done religiously or secularly with it other than noting it. I'm sure there's cards now, like Hallmark style cards and stuff available, but. Oh, there's Vic. Hey. All right. Well, thank you, Alan. That to me was very, all those images that I think for anybody who's not been to Israel, there is a falling in love that happens to everybody who goes to Israel for completely different reasons. And it's everybody experiences it differently, but universally, nobody goes to Israel and comes back the same. And you can say that for a lot of places. Like most people who go to visit the homeland of their ancestors describe something similar. There's something in the longing that has been transmitted through the generations that you only understand when you go there. But it's very profound visiting Israel. And I can't account for it. It's a great conversation for some other time, incorporating art and poetry and music. But there's the kina, the longing for, is something that is so unique to Israel, because it's so much more elevated from what I hear from people describing visiting homelands. So
I thought that one was so beautiful that it looked like stained glass. I mean, I just fell in love with that piece, those panels.
I just changed my my background to be blurred, but on my screen everything is coming out really jerky. Is it the
Looks
same
smooth.
for
It
everybody?
looks smooth from here. No.
Okay,
No.
well, I'll leave it and see if it works. I was just playing with the settings. All right. Boy, we have a lot of Misha Berach.
Yeah.
We'll
Well, I feel like I
start
should
with,
put quarantine. Feel like I should put quarantine across my name
Okay, we'll start with you, Alan, and Nella, and Rachel.
and Rachel.
Right, that's on your end.
COVID trio.
Yes. So I'd like to just start with everybody on the screen that needs a Misha Berach. So Yehuda, still you.
Still you.
Even though I think every day is better. So you're on the road there. Heather, you need a Misha Berach.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And everybody else, I don't know who's not here on the screen in our community, who's usually with us, would be Sarah.
Sarah, I called her on, or I wrote to her on her birthday. I mean, maybe she'll show up here. I think she's okay.
And Jan and Vivian,
And Elaine with her knee.
Elaine,
And Mike.
Goldie, Mike, everybody pipe in, because I know
Marilyn,
Marilyn, yes.
I just found out on Facebook from a local friend. She was actually met her because she gave a Yiddish class during COVID, and her mother was rushed to the hospital yesterday. She's feeling guilty because she's, her sisters are taking she's 50 years old, but she's an old soul, but like when I listen to all this stuff, it's like that progression that people have. And when people have moved away from their families and then they feel, torn because they have obligations in different places. So she asked for special extra prayers for her mother. So I will.
Okay.
Bella, I think she said Bella Bat Sarah, but I'm not sure. Bella.
And outside of our KBS family, we have a number of people saying Misha Berach for. Carol Huber, Michael Cohn. Who else?
Said him already.
Ted Diamond.
Ted. Oh yeah, Ted Diamond. So many.
Ben Plow.
Yeah.
Was your son?
Yeah, he's okay.
Or is he just? Oh.
He needs a Misha Berach, but he's
Okay.
okay. And we're gonna add Laura Metzger to our usual lineup, Yehuda, from now to forever, probably. Okay, so and then we extend that to anyone in our personal circle, our family, our Jewish community, the general community we live in, and as far as that can go.
The overall and the world at large. Okay, let me get the right key. Misha Berach Avotenu Makor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu, Makor habracha liavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Thank you. Beautiful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Vic, start us off since you're here.
Right. And it shall come about in consequence of your heeding these laws, and you keep them, do them, and that the Lord your God will keep the covenant and the faith for you that he swore to your fathers. And he will love you and bless you and multiply you and bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, your oil, the spawn of your herds, the calvelings of your flock, upon soil that he swore your fathers to give you. Blessed shall be more than all the peoples. There shall be no sterile male nor female among you and among your beasts. And the Lord shall turn away from you all illness and all evil ailments of Egypt, which you knew. He will not put upon you, but will set them on all who hate you. And you shall devour all the peoples that the Lord your God is about to give to you. Your eyes shall not pity them, and you shall not worship their gods, for it is a snare to you. Should you say in your heart, these nations are more numerous than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not fear them. You shall surely remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all Egypt. The great trials of your own eyes saw, the signs, the portents, and a strong hand, and the outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do all that to the people you fear. And the hornet too will the Lord send against them until those who remain and hide from you perish. You shall not be terrified by them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, and a great and fearsome God. The Lord your God will cast off these nations from before you, little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them swiftly, lest the beasts of the field multiply against you. The Lord your God will give them before you and panic them, great panic until they are destroyed. And he will give their kings into your hands, and you shall make their name perish from under the heavens. No man will stand up before you until you destroy them. The images of their gods shall burn in fire. You shall not covet the silver and the gold upon them, and take it for yourself, lest you be snared by it. For it is an abhorrence to the Lord your God. And you shall bring no abhorrent thing into your house, or you will be under the ban like it. You shall surely despise it, and you shall surely abhor it, for it is under the ban.
Okay. Whew.
Pretty intense.
Pretty intense. I was tempted to do a longer reading because this parasha is considered to be divided into three distinct speeches. And this is just the beginning of what's considered, I mean, in the commentaries I was reading, to be the first speech. So there's like 20 more lines that constitute this as being the first speech. And when you read them that way, they actually feel a little bit better, but we don't shy from discomfort. So we can just go with the lines we just read as the beginning of the discussion. So
The
context, go ahead.
the new thing, or the thing that caught my ear that I hadn't noticed before, was he says to the people he's speaking to what you experienced, and yet they're not. They're a couple of generations now removed from the ones who actually experienced these things. So is that an implication that we all are supposed to say we were all present, that's the spirit that we should view it in, or is Moses just using kind of a papal we when he describes you, says that you experienced this?
So I have a formula that I test things by, and it really, really comes into being it when we think about last week's parasha and this week's parasha. So the Shema and the Vahavta, which are together, because I really beg to differ with everybody who says that the Shema is sort of a complete thing. The Shema is nothing without the Vahavta, and the Vahavta is nothing without what comes afterwards. So the Shema and Vahavta are focused on the one person. It's always you. Everything ends in Cha, Adonai Elohecha, the Lord your God, with all your heart, b'chol levavcha, right? Everything ends in Cha, it's your. Now we move into, and what we will read throughout this parasha is the plural. And so I think there's that, what is the great transformation about to happen before crossing over into the promised land, whatever it may be. And I say that rolling my eyes. I don't know if you can see that, because there's something there that's quite utterly disturbing. If you just want to leave it at that and call it promised land with a capital P and capital L, and remember, there's no capitalization in Hebrew, so any translation that capitalizes them is giving it a value. So the transformation between being a people in transition and getting ready to start a society, that's the whole difference. It's the individual, and the measure of success and the ability of humans to continue upon the earth is never the individual. It cannot be. It's vacuous. There's nothing there. So that to me is the bookmark of coming from that. You individually have to carry this in your heart and do your utmost est. That's the Vahavta. And includes everything. What doesn't include? It's all these, between the binaries and the everythingness, it really includes everything. And then you add it to teaching it to your children. Like, so it never ends with you, right? So there's a continuity. And then you move into the plural, and all the rest is the plural. So to me, it works. I measure everything into that formula. Like, it's meaningless to me if I just have to sit and think these things in my heart. It starts with that. But what you do
make a mental jump though, if you're gonna, when you say Shema Yisrael, that tends to be a plural word, not a singular. Israel can be singular, and you can't say that you are Israel. And yet, that's the full circle. That word alone is the full circle of the you and the us, or the greater community.
Well, in the Hebrew, the Shema, just that sentence, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, it's plural.
I know.
Adonai Eloheinu.
And I'm saying that that's the use of the word Yisrael is plural. So even though the Vahavta is in the singular.
Because it seems like, I don't know, to me, the Vahavta reads as a explanation to what the Shema is saying. The Shema is like code word. You can just say it after you know what it means. You can just say that, and then it's as if you're saying Amen by just saying it, right?
You have to start with the singular if people are going to take it on.
That's right.
Otherwise they can just, lose themselves in the plural and not feel personal responsibility.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm struck by the line in 22 that I think is a great modification is the eternal your God will dislodge those people before you little by little. And yet everything that sort of leads up to this is saying, well, go in there and kill them all. And this is basically, oh no, we're going to actually step back and say, maybe it doesn't actually work like that. That maybe what we're doing this very incrementally, and that the whole nature of going in and usurping another people, another set of beliefs actually has to do with very small incremental changes.
Yeah. So the traditional explanation that I, always understood is little by little, because if you do too much, you're not going to gain anything. The beasts of the land will take over, right? And to me, I'm surprised this is where you chose to go with this line, because to me, this is a very troubling line, which if you wished to give justification to things going on this very day, you could lean into that. So to me, it's troubling in that way, because I think you can misread it easily to imply that.
In fact, even more troubling, if like you said, if you keep reading in line 24, no man will stand up before you until you destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very grim.
And the line before it. Wait, I have a better translation. By the way, Alan, you have new slides, I noticed.
Today, I'm going to show you the family tree of Hawaiian monarchs.
Okay.
This is the...
Oops. All right. So line 23 is also troubling. The Lord your God will give them before you and panic them with a great panic until they are destroyed. Hello. And,
Well, it sort of doesn't make sense when you have the line before this say little by little, because panic tends to be something that you do immediately right away to deal with something that's freak out. So that 22 and 23 do not go together, those two lines.
These three lines together look like a playbook that somebody has decided to interpret and follow. Do they not read that way to other people?
I'm just getting the general feeling. Sometimes I think we probe a little too hard. This book, as opposed to all the others, is more poetic and it's more symbolic, I think. And a lot of this seems to be said hyperbolically and very generally. And then on top of that, I don't know if it's because of the translation or whatever, when you just read, it said, no man shall stand before you until you destroy them. Who is the them? And who is the them? How can the man stand if it's the them? And this is a thing when we read biblical, and then with today's syntax and everything, all those rules about who the pronoun should refer to go out the window. And it's a little disconcerting to me. But apropos to what Alan first asked, again, I think what I'm saying that this is more symbolic is because it's suspending time. It's suspending time. So whoever is the physical witness in the flesh at that particular moment, they're just in the continuity of that energy, the genetic code or whatever, everything that came before and everything that's going to come after. So whenever any of this is addressed to, it's all the people all the time, It's just because we're limited by this time-space continuum, we get stuck in these conundrums about who are they speaking to, and it goes back to what Aviv always points out about the Lador Vador, and more specifically in the Haggadah, you shall read the stories if you personally came out of Egypt. And that's what makes it relevant still today to us. So that's my take.
Craig, did you want to say something? I see you unmuted. Okay. And Vic Vic just muted.
Yeah.
All right, I want to keep reading. I just wanted to show how we can stop there. Now let's give context, because the very next sentence it is beginning to give context. Vic, you can continue if you'd like.
Okay. All the commandment which I charge you today, you shall do, in order that you may live and multiply, and come and take hold of the land which the Lord has sworn to your fathers. And you shall remember all the way on which the Lord your God led you, these 40 years in the wilderness, in order to afflict you, to test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commands or not. And he afflicted you and made you hunger and feed you on the manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, in order to make you know that not on bread alone does the human live, but on every utterance of the Lord's mouth does the human live. Your cloak did not wear out upon you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. And you knew in your heart that as a man chastises his son, the Lord your God chastises you. And you shall meet keep the commands of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For the Lord your God is about to bring you into a goodly land of brooks and waters, springs and deeps, coming out in the valley and in the mountain, and a land of wheat and barley and vines and figs and pomegranates, a land of olive oils and honey, a land where not in penury you should eat bread, you shall not lack nothing in it, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose mountains you will hew copper, and you will eat and be satisfied, and bless the Lord your God on the goodly land that he has given you. Watch yourself, lest you forget the Lord your God and not keep his commands, and his laws and his statutes that I charge you this day, lest you eat and be sated and build goodly houses and dwell in them. And your cattle and sheep multiply, and silver and gold multiply for you, and all that you have multiply. And your heart become haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who brings you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves, who leads you through the great and terrible wilderness, viper, serpent, and scorpions and thirst. There is no water, who brings water out for you from flintstone, who feeds you manna in the wilderness, which your fathers did not know, in order to afflict you and in order to try you, to make it go well with you in your later time. And you will say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand made me this well. You will remember the Lord your God, for he it is who gives you power to make wealth, in order to fulfill his covenant that he swore with your fathers on this day.
All right.
And did we listen? No. Hubris is the word of the day. A warning against hubris, and look where we are.
So in this particular part, the last part that Vic just read, there's that concept that's a little easier to understand. We heard a wonderful Rabbi Sachs thing about it this morning. And it goes also with the concept of the fall of great civilizations. And that is that when you start to take for granted that all the things that are good around you are from your own doing, and then you start to want more of the good, so you accumulate wealth or land or whatever, and then you start to do what? You start to forget all the mitzvot. That eventually leads to times of great strife and eventually falls of governments, civilizations. The trajectory is that when you forget and you begin to assume that all of the good in your life is because of you alone, because you're smarter, wilier, bigger and stronger, whatever, when you attribute it to yourself, that's when the bad things happen. And that, there's a lot of implication that whatever the the way the second reading that Vic just started says, Kol hamitzvah asher anochi metzavcha hayom. The entirety of the everything. We don't even know what that is. We've already established it's not 10, it's not 613, it's everything, all the laws. And the laws do not pertain just to you and yours. That's the great thing that's missing from being spelled out here. It's not the you and yours. The laws are universal. That'll be in the next, we'll have to wait a week or so to clarify that. But it can't be just for you and yours, because once that happens, that's the beginning of the end of all goodness. So when things are repeated in the Torah, when they're mentioned many times, there's two ways we can look at it. One is that they're that important, and two is because we might have forgotten and we need a reminder. And one of those classically that's usually talked about is the mention of the stranger or the sojourner in your midst and the obligations you have. And that is, I've read sources that say 38 times and other sources that say 42 times. That is one of the most repeated concepts in the Torah. So again, because they are that important and because they've been forgotten. So when you start a book or a sentence or anything that says, be sure to do all of my, and then fill in the blank, that is a huge thing. It is not just how you feel today about what it includes today.
You got to remember who brought you here.
You dance with the one what brung you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes it feels like the one who brought you here is a wizard with a pointy hat.
Mm-hmm.
And other times it feels like you can ask people who believe in many different things. It can be a charismatic leader, right? That can be anything. It's just like, what is the name of God? Because there is no one name, we don't stop and obsess over it. And because we don't want to bring any dishonor, we have to be careful in all ways that we speak, because we might utter the name of God inadvertently, because we don't know what it is, as Yuda says. What's your peach cobbler analogy, Yuda?
So we don't, the last time someone knew the actual name of God were the high priests who said it in the inner sanctum of a temple that was destroyed 2,000 years ago. So therefore, everything that comes out of your mouth could be the name of God. So watch what you say.
And how you act. And, whether you believe it's somebody that looks like a person sitting on high in a cloud, or if you believe whatever image that you need to believe, it doesn't. What's most important is that you believe that there's something greater than you. At all times, there's something greater than you. What you call that something can be very individual. But when a person thinks that they are the highest there is, that's the admonition. Any person. When any person thinks that they're the end all, that's the admonition. That's when you've forgotten.
I alone can fix it.
Where
It's
have we
just
heard
when you
that?
said that, it just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed a change in Moses' perspective. Most of the previous 4 books, it has been the here and now that he's dealing with. This is what's happening today, and they needed water today, or they were complaining they didn't have meat, so they needed meat, the quail, or all those things. But now he's become a prophet. He's speaking of the future. He's saying there will be a future, and the future will play out a certain way if you follow the rules. And he hadn't been. I don't think he had been projecting that way. I don't recall any particular episodes in the previous books where he was looking ahead to that future. It was, how do we get through this journey?
Mhm. Well, what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of kind of anything? Because if there's no future orientation, there doesn't need to be purpose. Listen to these three very, very important words. And you shall eat and be satisfied and bless, right? We have a lot of references to eating being something beyond calories, right? It's not enough to eat and stave off hunger. Is that enough? Because, you eat for lots of, you eat for lots of reasons. In the worst of times, and this is all over the news right now, the calculation of how to keep a population from starving is a calculation. Like, how many calories are needed per person to keep starvation away? It's a pragmatic way of looking at it. But food is nourishment, not just calories, right? It's not just energy. So ideally, in order for there to be a future, you eat, you are satisfied, and you bless. Right? It's not
And
enough to
repeat.
just
And
and
repeat.
repeat. Right. Now, what's the bless? There we go. It's the all of it. And in whatever form, that's the thing that's missing, because I dare say this, and I'm keeping way away from being too obviously political, but if you are indeed responsible for the sojourners among you, a chart that calculates how many calories a physical being needs in order to not starve is only 1/3 of the enjoyment. Ve'achalta, ve'savata, uverachta. Eat your fill and thank God. And how does a thank you God manifest? Is it enough to say, thank you, God? I don't know. Doesn't seem to go anywhere. Where's the future in it? All of the promised land and the standing across and viewing it as a future orientation. You are correct. That is, Ellen, that's the observation. Moses has done his job, and the rest he has to trust that people have learned the various important lessons along the way. Otherwise, there is no future.
Alternative name for Devarim, the way we think about how people give us speeches. In conclusion, we talked about this before. Of course, Alan, what you said, he was the conduit for God's words. But this time, he's giving the review, like you said, A, because it's important, B, so to help people remember, because repetition is a form of learning. And so it is always, more with his voice, and it is more future looking. Because he's finally about to take his eternal rest, and so he doesn't have to worry about the day-to-day anymore.
Yep.
But that's why I think it's poetic. But something's hitting me, and since we talked about this partial last week, we're talking about it in terms of being sated and how you bless your food and everything. Now, the economist in me, and part of the whole issues that I deal with that bother me about human beings mixing up wants with needs, we end up having greed, avarice, worry about having enough. We have the examples of that when the people wanted to collect the manna for the next day, which Hashem said, do not do, because they didn't have faith. And this, ultimately, it goes back again to that fear of the unknown, the fear of want, the fear of living too long, whatever it is, however you want to put it. That's the human corporal fear overcoming us. And that's what we're supposed to surrender and understand, that that's where a higher power, and that's where the energy that we are all part of will provide. But on one hand, when they talk about all the great things you'll have in this land and the plenty and the plenty and the plenty, what they should be worrying about is a sufficiency. Everyone has their sufficiency, they're satiated. Then they don't have to feel selfish about sharing it with anyone else, you know, and that's what starts to get to be missed. And that, I think maybe that is the result of the rationalization that people say, well, I have to take care of my own first. I have to take care of myself. I got to make sure I'll have enough. I got to have to store everything up, you know, like the squirrel. And so that leads consequently to thinking I alone can control it. Human beings are responsible for what we have, and therefore we are responsible for maintaining and, quote unquote, wisely using what we have. So they are then again, no trust in Hashem, and that leads to this downfall you're talking about.
Yehuda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Viva and I were talking this morning about, because we do Torah study before Torah study.
We get that.
What we were talking about, you know, the whole nature of what's being offered, the physical manifestations that constitute having a good life. And yet, you know, you look at this one statement, you don't live by bread alone, or, you know, accept for a given everything, all the bounty that you have been given, that there's much more import laid upon the attitudes you bring to everything. And that the attitudes are more important really than you know, how wealth is manifest in your life, whatever that wealth constitutes.
But I think that's one thing that bothers me a little bit about from the Jewish tradition. Again, they have the idea of private property. You know, there are all these affirmations for having a reason, a legitimate reason to hoard, to collect, or to you know, to take more than you need. I mean, to some degree, well, the whole story of having to go to Egypt and everything, you can't survive if you're not prepared. And that this is also the thing that's a problem for me, because we live in a temporal place. And as Yehuda said, things are more important, but everything has its place. And what you said, eat, be satisfied, and give thanks. And in the context of watching lesser, you know, less fortunate people, the sojourners, the strangers go hungry, they can't deal with number 2 and 3 or at least they can't deal with number 3 until they kind of had given help with number 1 and then been able to get to number 2, which is to be satisfied, you know, because we know physically that's that dichotomy, that conundrum all the time about we have to maintain our physical bodies, you know, optimally, hopefully, because you know, when your stomach is growling, it's really hard to do anything else. You know, those are the practical sides of it. But I guess maybe in some ways, as I'm thinking about it, the people on the side of having the plenty, who are satiated and comfortable, it kind of is. They are beholden to, in their comfort, be able to recognize that they don't need everything that they have, and they have to be the ones to take the lead to make sure those with less get what they need. And that's, if that breaks down and people get hubris and want to accumulate and think that only they did it and God has nothing to do with it, we end up with civilizations like we have now. It started with a benevolence and then it turns into something else.
Yeah.
Being stated is a very, you know, it means different things to different people. You know, and once again, this has to do with, you know, your attitude about what you need and what's important in your life. It's not, you know, just being full to here.
Right. Well, I was, you know, there's a connotation, yes, sated in everything. Like we're saying, it's not just physical nourishment, but again, see, that's why I went through this whole thing. One of the reasons I said I studied economics, you know, to try to do something to help people make sure that social welfare people have what they need, because it's more obvious what they need. And somebody said to me, we had been working in a mental hospital. He said somebody who was depressed or something, or kids who weren't touched. And he said, you can have physical food but that's not going to, it's not enough to sustain life. So he made me think there are other higher things, that people need. And, we studied all this stuff, the notion of what happens to babies who are not held and all that, even though a machine may be feeding them milk. But it's like, there's still somewhat of a hierarchy, you still got to start somewhere. And to some degree, we have to start with satisfying the physical needs. The trick is not to get stuck in that and realize that's only a means to an end, which is moving forward into the future, sustaining long enough for the next generations to be able to carry on, what came before them.
But there's also something built in, since you brought up the subject of economics, and that's, you can read a lot of very interesting views about that the Western world right now is on the cusp of some sort of end of civilization because of, and fill in the blank on the following. When resources are accumulated by a very few, and those very few decide how to allocate them, this feels like a big prohibition against everything that we are wanting to learn, wanting to believe in. That is, what does that say? It says that people individually feel like if they had so much and only they can give, you've got the only I can syndrome. And the only I can syndrome, it can go two ways. A person can be very good and benevolent and use that only I can eradicate malaria from the continent of Africa, or the only I can decide what's good for you or me, right? So, and anywhere along the way, but it still puts the ability to do good in the hands of people. And those three words, ve'achalta, be'savata, uverachta, are a big reminder that say, nah. If it means that a person is the one who gets to decide who gets what and who gets happiness and enjoyment, wrong. Big buzzer, wrong. Big red X, go back and try again. Like, go back to square one and try again, because you have really gone down a wrong path. In Chutes and Ladders, it'd be like you've reached the pinnacle and then one ladder takes you right back to the beginning. That's the simplicity. And, so again, is it possible to pick out individual lines here and look at them and say, oh, I don't like this line, it's very troubling. If only we were able to eradicate all the enemies from our land, then we will sit and eat off the fat of the land. It's so troubling, but yet those words seem to be there. They seem to be there. I don't know how to, I work really hard every year at trying to find an angle that makes me see it in a different way. And, I can get esoteric, but I'm trying to,
I have some of the, well, when we read this and we're in the light of current situation and historical conflicts and the notion of what was promised to whom, we all go through that. It's hard. It's definitely hard for us among this group, who we may not be ultra Orthodox. We are certainly, I don't believe any of us here are taking any of this 100% literally, but, within the limits of language and history and whatever, it's not just it's a random sign, beat buzz on a radio signal. So it's very tough. Because can't we all just get along, like Rodney King? While we're on this earth, we have to be somewhere. We physically have to be somewhere. And where is that somewhere? And if we get away from the notion, well, this was promised to me and not to you and blah, 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 we would probably be living in the moment, and we would all be closer to fulfilling our natural potential and God-given or whatever given, life-given right to pursue our own way forward, as long as we're not stepping on other people's intentions and toes, unjustly, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so to me, putting that filter on that says everything is future oriented, right? Everything is future oriented. Look at the wording in the Hebrew, anything that ends with a sound at the end, ve'achalta, you shall eat, ve'savata, uverachta. It's future oriented. You shall eat, you shall be satisfied, and you shall bless. So if I just take that future orientation filter and apply it to what I'm reading, it gives me the context that makes me feel comfortable. Let's take one of the most well-known 3 words in Hebrew, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ahavta, and you shall love.
No.
Re'acha, oh, we can translate that many ways, but the last one as yourself. You shall love, fill in the blank, as yourself. Re'acha is a very complex word. This is the beauty of Hebrew. It does not mean only the one that is most like you or only the one that you like. It has a complex build that allows it to include even your enemies.
So what's the best you could do? You use the word another. You shall love another as yourself.
Well, if we take the supposition that all creatures are created in the image of God, that's pretty expansive. You can fill in that blank. But the modern word of the modern meaning of the word re'ah is really implies your friend, your buddy. Right? So where along that, give me just a minute, where along that do we want to start or stop? It's one of those things that we are not given the freedom to make that decision. You want to interpret it this way? Well, sit down and listen, because there'll be many who will interpret it differently and as legitimately, right? So you don't get that comfort. You don't get to pick and choose that one.
That's true. But as the word, like in well, since post Christianity time, it's usually in English, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Well, who's your neighbor?
But right, is that even one of the definitions of the word in Hebrew? Is neighbor one of the ways even the Hebrew scholars in the past would?
Sure. Because the
but
neighbor
it's just
is
one, but you're saying that it's not specific. There's many connotations to the.
Okay, I'm just going to say one more thing and then I'd rather hear Alan. But your neighbor can be the one who lives next door to you or the one who shares the planet on which you're living, and anywhere in between.
But your whole point was that word in the middle. I'm going back to your Hebrew stuff. And what did you say? But
Ve'ahavta, you shall love, future oriented.
Right.
L'reacha.
Le'echa?
Re'acha.
Oh, re'acha.
Yeah.
So what we're questioning is how you would, the connotation of the word re'acha.
Right. So even if you want the simplicity of your neighbor, is it your neighbor to your right, to your left, in the state that you live in, or on the planet that we all call home? I mean, because that's home. So you don't get the easy out. Yeah. But you know, the yardstick of measurement is if you're harming someone as you're living your life, there's something wrong, because that's where all the rules fit in, all the ways that we are enjoined not to harm others. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to actually mute myself, so I really shut up, and I want to hear Alan.
Oh no, don't. But I find appealing that the promise that we're getting of what we need. You'll eat until you're satisfied. You'll have bountiful crops that will fulfill your needs. We're not being told that we're going to have the wealth of Croesus or be able to have huge mansions or whatever else. It's you'll have what you need, and it seems to be, I think, advising or at least warning against gluttony. We already had that with the complaints about not getting enough meat, and we had so much quail it was coming out our nostrils. But also in the previous parshot, in several places, we've had the edict or the rule set down that you must provide for those among you who are in need, whether it comes to not gleaning the edges or not harvesting the edges of the field to leave it for the poor or the widow or the orphan to glean from. The community has a responsibility that's built in here, and it doesn't matter that you. It seems like the promise is not that you're going to have great wealth, but that you're going to have what you need, and that should be enough, so that there'll be enough to share with those who are not in the same position you're in. And I think that they, even though that's not mentioned in this portion, I think they go together. I think the idea that you'll eat until you're satisfied, but you can't be satisfied if your neighbor is starving.
When I mentioned that to a certain degree, I was taking it more broadly as, because it's always this talk about abundance. It's this, that everything will flow. The intimation is, I mean, I guess we stop and think about it. The conclusion should be exactly as you described it, Alan, because we have this hierarchy of importance, and it's not just enough to be fed. It's to recognize gratitude for being satiated. And then by extension, that means because God will always provide, there will be enough for everybody. But the way it's written there, and I think maybe that's part of it, makes room for misinterpretation when people then feel, again, they're losing sight of number 3 again, basically. But part of that, maybe it's just poetic license, because everything's written in such great hyperbole of it will flow and it will be all these grapes and the land that that whole thing. It implies like, oh, we're going to be sitting there on this storehouse of all this great stuff, and so that in the evil inclination is to say, yum 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 yum, more for me, so I guess that's what I was counting. So that's what I was commenting more on, is that the language kind of lends itself for people to kind of go to the extreme. And I guess our job is to pay attention and realize, no, that ain't it.
Oh, how did I get unmuted? Oops. Okay. I would like to keep reading because everything we're talking about pertains. Heather, if you're still with us, would you like to do a little stint?
Sure, that's fine. And it will be if you indeed forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and worship them and bow to them, I bear witness against you today that you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord causes to perish before you, so shall you perish, inasmuch as you would not heed the voice of the Lord your God. Dear Israel, you're about to cross the Jordan to dispossess nations greater and mightier than you, great towns and fortified to the heavens, a great and lofty people, sons of giants. And you yourself knew, and you yourself heard, who can stand up before the sons of giants? And you know today that the Lord your God, he is crossing over before you, a consuming fire. He himself will destroy them, and he will lay them low before you, and you shall dispossess them and make them perish swiftly, as the Lord has spoken to you. Do not say in your heart when the Lord your God drives them back before you, saying, through my merit did the Lord bring me to take hold of this land, and through the wickedness of these nations is the Lord dispossessing them before you. Not through your merit, nor not through your heart's rightness do you come to take hold of their land, but through the wickedness of these nations is the Lord your God dispossessing them before you, in order to fulfill the word the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And you shall know that not through your merit is the Lord your God giving you this goodly land to take hold of it, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget that you infuriated the Lord your God in wilderness from the very day you came out of the land of Egypt, and you came into this place. You have been rebellious against the Lord, and in Horeb you infuriated the Lord, and the Lord was incensed with you enough to destroy you. When I went up to the mountain to take stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant the Lord sealed with you, and I stayed on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. No bread did I eat, nor water did I drink. And the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets written with the finger of God, and on them were all the words that the Lord spoke with you from the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly. And it happened at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And the Lord said to me, "Arise, go down quickly from here, for your people you brought out of Egypt has acted ruinously, and they have quickly swerved from this way that I've charged them. They have made them a molten image." And the Lord said to me, saying, "I have seen this people, and look, it is a stiff-necked people. Leave me be that I may destroy them and wipe out their name from under the heavens and make you into a greater and mightier nation than they." And I turned and came down from the mountain burning in fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant in my 2 hands. And I saw and looked, you offended the Lord your God, and you made a molten calf. You swerved quickly from the way that the Lord charged you. And I seized the 2 tablets and flung them from my hands and smashed them before your eyes. And I threw myself before the Lord, as at first 40 days and 40 nights, no bread did I eat, no water did I drink, for all your offense which you committed, as you offended to do what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, to anger him. For I was terrified at the blazing wrath for which the Lord was furious enough with you to destroy you. And the Lord listened to me that time as well. And the Lord was greatly enough incensed with Aaron to destroy him. And I interceded in behalf of Aaron too at that time. And your offense that you made the calf I had taken and burned in the fire and crushed it, grinding it well till it was fine into dust. And I had flung his dust into the wadi that came down from the mountain. And at Tabra and Massah and Kibroth and Hot-Tavah, you infuriated the Lord. And when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, you said, "Go up and take hold of the land that I have given to you." You rebelled against the word of the Lord your God, and you did not trust him. You did not heed his voice. You have been rebellious against the Lord from the day I knew you, and I threw myself before the Lord the 40 days and 40 nights. I threw myself where the Lord had intended to destroy you, and I interceded with the Lord and said, "My master, Lord, do not bring ruin upon your people and on your estate that you ransomed through your greatness, that you brought out of Egypt with a strong hand. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Turn not to the stiffness of these people, nor to the wickedness of this offense, lest these peoples of the land to which you brought us out of here and say, from the Lord's inability to bring them into the land for which he spoke to them, or from his hatred of them, he brought them out and put them to death in the wilderness. And they are your people and your estate that you brought out with your great power and your outstretched arm."
Yeah, only 120 days without food and water, climbing up and down a mountain, holding these boulders that you carved with all the energy that you had. Whew. There's the miracle right there. This is so self-referential. You know, Moses was not so self-referential in the first 4 books as here. So when King Josiah, or the people that he tasked to do this, wrote this, what was their goal? To put it in a self-referential format.
I agree. We've never heard "I" that often from Moses. I did this. I did this. It's. Aren't you grateful? Are you not? Are you not pleased with what I did? It's almost as though, he's taking credit for these things, and that's uncharacteristic. Very much unlike how he's responded to how he's.
Right. He's the humble man. He's the humble man.
Oh my God, you guys. I'm sorry. I think you're overly sensitive. See, here we go again. What is truth? What is just the facts, ma'am? This is a repeat of the history, And he has to make a distinction. That used to get us confused sometimes. He would talk, but it was really God's words coming out of his mouth. This time it's well, it's not the third person for him, is it? Or, it's a history lesson. It's not a recounting of, we're supposedly having a fly on the wall view of exactly what happened in the desert, even though we were all there, right? This is a retelling. And he did do these things. And it's important. I don't think it's out of hubris. I think that the same way that one of the other most important things is when Abraham bargained with God. This to me are the best illustrations of the fact that there can be no Hashem without people, without his children, and there can be no children without Hashem. It definitely is a two-way street. The Jacob's ladder, you could go up and down. This is a little different from other religions, and I think it makes it, the whole idea that we did not need any intermediary to pray. And we were afraid of that to the degree that children of Israel in the desert got afraid of that. We as a future generations lost some of these other sensitive ways that we might feel the Lord's presence, and I think it's important. And then to add to that, again, in the more pragmatic way, because in fact, he's telling this story again, if to the degree that we could accept this as historical truth, it was a different set of people because it was the next generation who were only there in their DNA and their parents, ovaries and testes, or however they would have been there.
Heather, love to hear what you want to say.
Sure. All I want to say is, if he is just venting, I mean, let's just give the guy a break. He's human. He didn't ask for any of this, and these people have been so stiff-necked, as the businessman said. So I feel like this is his time to be able to say what he wants to say. Get it out of his system.
I'm with Heather. I think that this is Moses at a stage of life where he's reflecting back before the known fact that he will not be there forever. I read it that way, and it makes the most sense to me that way. It is full of parental caring, admonishment. There's so much of the humanity of Moses in here that I cannot attribute any greatness to him. Moses is a person first and foremost, and he has not been his own agent from a very young age. So in a sense, he's not been his own agent, right? He was disconnected from his birth family at an early age. He is the biggest example to us of how, though you can be disconnected from your birth family, that always is part of who you are, and you're never a whole person without having access to knowing where you came from. We know that in very modern ways. The field of psychology confirms that all the time. All the laws about adoption have changed based on that there's real harm to humans when they have no access to understanding where they come from. And so I grant Moses all the humanity in the world and a whole lot of dose of wisdom. So when he's doing his retelling here, I don't think he's aiming to do it in any way other than a dose of reality. I mean, it works for me that way. If I read these words as Moses, an older person who has seen generations, has been trying to fulfill a task he was tasked with very early in life, learning to accept advice along the way. These are all very human characteristics. And then we have to put, the historical time period of the original story and the retelling when it was written, and things come together in a way that don't irk me. I'm human. So if I'm human, first and foremost, I can tap into people's fallibilities. If I saw myself as godlike, I probably wouldn't. But I think that that's the connection we're making. Moses is connecting to real people who are about to go on a task, and he needs them to understand it in the real way because they are real people. That And line 4, that's why I wanted to say line 4 here is just an example of that admonishment. And when your God Adonai has thrust them from your path, do not say in your heart, okay, I'm going to read what Alan put. Do not say in your heart when the Lord God drives them, your enemies, back before you, saying, through my merit did the Lord bring me to take hold of this land, and through the wickedness of these nations is the Lord dispossessing them before you. It's not through the wickedness of the other nations. Look at this line, it's really important. It is an acknowledgement that it is not because of your own smarts that you are finding yourself about to inherit this land flowing with milk and honey. It is through the future work that you're willing to put into it. All those teachings are not for naught, because guess what? The milk and honey will dry up. So there's no magic. You're looking for the magic, and Moses is saying it's not magic. There's no magic. There's no wand that's going to be waved over your head. It's real work.
But there are some sweeping statements in here that are uncomfortable, to put it mildly. I'm reminded there was I wish I remembered the exact line, but there was a line in Bereshit of God complaining that every time the humans get involved, it's something evil, or they're doing something evil. And we've got the line here from Moses, line 24. You have been rebellious against the Lord from the day I knew you. And it's just this sweeping statement. Not saying some of you have been that way, or we've had to deal with the effects of those being rebellious, but it's you have been rebellious against the Lord. That it's almost unredeemable to say that.
No, I mean, you're taking the first, but the ultimate is, it's not unredeemable, but because Hashem loves you and is forgiving, you know, you are going to go, in that case, I think the you is the plural you. Again, we go back and forth, that up and down between addressing an individual or addressing the whole nation. And that we have to look at his sweeping statements as meaning to all the children of Israel who are before him, and every generation, whether they're there in present or not. Because if it was only for them, there'd be no reason for us to read this, right? And that's, again, there has to be a transcendence above the purely physical way to understand this. Otherwise, personally, maybe you agree with me or not, I hope, I would think you tend to, that it doesn't have much to speak to us today about, right?
No, but what it says to me, or what I imply from that, is we're doomed to repeat the cycle. That we are going to fail, so we have to pull ourselves together and realize where we made our mistakes, and then move ahead following the rules that we were given to live by.
And many attempts to simplify those rules so that you can follow them. An oversimplification can lead to disasters. So how do we look at a commandment that's 2 words that says do not murder? And how do we look at one that says keep the Sabbath? Right? So there's, if we need to oversimplify in order to, not be intimidated, sure. But there is no, the acknowledgement is that there is no oversimplification, and that mindfulness, and I use this term mindfulness outside of the context of what it means today, that mindfulness is kind of where it's at. So like you have a checklist. Is what I'm doing satisfying to me? Is what I'm doing harmful to someone else? That's a simplification, right? But what does it actually mean? What does satisfying to me mean? And what does doing harm to someone else mean? There is so much. But if we need to, we can give away the personal ability to be in control of every aspect to our life. That's what a trusting community is, right? If you make sure that your next door neighbor has their needs met, they're going to be a better neighbor. You're not going to feel a need to build a fence around your place. But if you think that your neighbor is not getting what they need out of life, you're going to build a fence. Because an unhappy neighbor can be dangerous to you. So what can you do about it? Well, the first thing you can do is to get to know your neighbor. And if your neighbor says, my life is terrible because somebody else has come and taken the job that I thought was mine to have, or future oriented, my children's to have, you begin to see that there is no simplification. There is no oversimplification. So if you take care of your needs to a point where you are satisfied, meaning you're available to open your eyes and see what's going on around you in the world, and not forget to bless your God. And what is it, blessing your God? Who? How all-inclusive is God? How many commandments are there? Like all these things we can't actually answer. We can't. But we understand the concept. I think Craig has something to say.
I'm having a little trouble with the concept because we're talking about humanity and God. And here I keep hearing words that put human characteristics on God, that God is unhappy, God gets mad, God engages in collective punishment, which are all kind of foibles of humanity. And I'd like to think that God is above that. But here it suggests otherwise. And I don't know, it's a little bothersome. You'd think that God would be above human foibles. So that gets to me. And then if you think of the concept that, well, we're all created in the image of God, and when we're disappointed with God, are we disappointed with other humans? And I know it says that we were given the land, that's why we have it, and it's not based on the wickedness of the other people, but it is mentioned that they're wicked, and it gets down to modern claims for property too. So it's all a little confusing to me. What kind of a God do we have here? Is he one prone to anger and happiness, just like a human, or isn't he above that? So
first of all, let's not forget the words we're reading here are Moses's words. These are Moses's speeches in this book. So already, if we say that rule that if somebody is repeating something they heard, they're imbuing some sort of interpretation. So that is a grain of salt that we can definitely add. But your concern exists from before the time that humans were created, because there's a midrash that says that God had a conversation with the angels that basically he said, well, kind of lonely, and that the whole creation of humans is God's loneliness. There's that school of thought. But be that as it may, which is worse, for God to have characteristics of humans, or for humans to assume characteristics of God?
why do you say which is worse? I mean, it's good, I think, for humans to act in a godlike fashion. So that wouldn't be bad. I just think that God behaving as a human is a little disappointing because we elevate God. And so why would he sink to our level?
So there is a dialogue. There's always been a dialogue, right?
Wrestling with God. Yes.
Yeah. And that dialogue, from the earliest of the stories of that I can think of, there's a conversation that's only in Midrash because in the Torah, it actually only says that God said, let us make man in our image. The us thing is very confusing. That's why there's a lot of midrash about it. So even before the creation of humans, there's an implication that God was not alone. So what the essence of a creation of humans is a manifestation of God. The future orientation, to me, this is what I'm reading. I'm reading future orientation to everything we're reading right now. The what for of it all, so that you will live long in the land that I promised your ancestors. Why should you honor your mother and father? So that you will live long in the land, right? So that concept is ever present there. That if God created humans as a plaything because God was bored, God could also destroy humans because God may have a new interest, right? That goes without saying. But once humans inhabit the earth, in whichever way they arrive there, there's an acknowledgement that the inherent continuity of humankind and the earth is now in the realm of humans.
Right,
You
but
know?
just the concept, right, that God got lonely. Okay, that's interesting. God can get lonely. Does God get angry? And apparently so, right?
Yeah.
So it's human-like. And I
So
guess
a God can,
I want more from God than to be human-like.
okay, so a God can get so angry so as to destroy civilization. And sometimes it is a person who convinces God in very logical ways to say, wait, just a second here. What if there were 50 righteous people on the earth, right? That bargaining, we know that from Abraham and
Sodom and Gomorrah.
what's that?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. And so, you know, that ability, but what if humans decide to destroy the earth? Is there an equivalency there? Well, humans are created in the image of God. God has human qualities. So why is it not okay for a human to say, it's so bad here, let's just burn it all down?
And my final point is that anger throws people off. You could take October 7th, for example, or any violent crime. We don't want the victim family to necessarily do the investigation and the prosecution because they're on tilt. They're angry, which throws us off. And therefore, God getting angry, he can do things that he regrets. Apparently, maybe the Noah's flood is an example. And wow, is God as flawed as us, where he lets his anger get the better of him and then regrets it. So,
To the extent that I'm willing to acknowledge the existence of a God, I would never be comfortable with a God who's flawless. What connection would I have to that? Like, where's, what? It doesn't hold any meaning. It sets something up there that is an impossibility.
right, but we all want a judge who's objective. No, we don't want the judge who's been victimized. He should be impartial. When our top judge, God, gets angry, he can't make good judgments because anger throws us off.
Okay, so you're a lawyer, so I will say this specifically to you. I'm making leaps and bounds and leaps and bounds, but I think you'll get it. There is a school of thought that says that judges should not be nominated when they're young. That there's something, there's something wrong. What's wrong with the concept of nominating a judge to a lifetime position when they're young?
Not enough experience. They need to gain more wisdom.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a simple formula. Everybody understands that one. So humans have certain qualities that develop only from experience. Like if you have lost somebody important to you, you're in a league of people who have compassion for others going through the process, right? We can all imagine what it would feel like to lose someone. But if you've actually done it, then you are more open to understanding and having compassion for someone else. So why wouldn't the God that we are supposed to believe in, God mourns over senseless acts of violence, and God rues or regrets times when he or she was angry and caused destruction. That's an easier God to connect to.
I think we have a general understanding that, part of what we see throughout the narrative of the Torah is humans are learning how to be human and God's learning how to be God. And there's, that's the back and forth. And there's something very real and identifiable with that give and take.
So we've got a living and growing God who's getting better and wiser all the time?
Well, we would hope so. It'd be bad if it was going the other direction, huh, Greg?
I don't know. I ask you guys.
To Greg's point as well, he can't get away from his legal training, I think, to a large degree. And now I almost lost my train of thought. One thing we haven't brought up a lot lately, and this is why I think it has to come back, that it ends up being a two-way street, and it's also kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg. If we're in the image of God and we know what we are like, then we're going to assume, when we're trying to understand God, that the only way we can use our language and our experience and our visual palettes to define God, I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of amorphosis. I can never say that word, but anthropomorphization. But, and again, that whole midrash, this is my husband go back to over and over again. Hashem was lonely. Now, what we're stopped talking about is the idea of free will, and it started with Adam and Eve. Because Adam and Eve didn't follow a few, they're the ones who were presumably creative, or they were, what's the word I want? Their energy was compressed into a form out of the heavens and the earth to create a sentient being that could have a relationship with the world around him and her and Hashem. What was the point of being, to be lonely? This is the idea from the Greek gods, that they're up on Mount Olympus and moving people around like little dolls. So that's not what our God wanted, because, then it's a dream. It's not creating family, friends, whatever you want to call them. At the same time, the fact that we can't come up with a name for Hashem is because different roles, you would use a different name. And I would suggest that the way we're talking about it now, there is the sense of the father versus the child. We talk about the children of Israel. We think of God as a father. Now, more so in the Christian, because they're even making, more distinctions that the God himself came down in a human form or whatever, which we don't. But it all goes back to people trying to understand why we're here, what we're here for. Is there any greater purpose to it? And it's sort of, for better or for worse, we're going to tend to put it in a context of how we would act as people, because that's what we know. That's I'll stop now, because you heard some of there's a lot of convoluted stuff.
Alan had his hand up first, and then you. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, just actually to follow up on what Ruth Ellen was saying, and also maybe tie it in with Craig's point, is I don't think there's any concept in our beliefs, at least, that following these rules and living life a certain way makes us godlike. It makes us good humans. It makes us good members of our community. It makes us able to exist in the land that we've been given, however we want to perceive that. But there's never a promise that we would become godlike, that we would be elevated to this level.
You don't want.
And that there's no pathway to say, that's the glass ceiling. That's that's impenetrable. And I think that's perhaps the understanding of the relationship is maybe God needs to be a little more human, but we can't be any more godlike.
I love it. It's very, very good.
Okay, Yehuda?
I want to take on the whole notion that Ruth Ellen brings up periodically about free choice or free will. Free will seems to be a concept that is timeless, and we don't live that way. We actually live in the present always. And therefore, the concept of free will, of free choice, has no place because it is timeless. There, you can't assign that particular phraseology to a point in time. It does not exist. So therefore, I question it from the get-go. I think that there's no philosophical basis that actually, even though there are many philosophers who spent a lot of writ addressing this, but since we live in the present and there is no such thing as free will in a time with a timestamp, therefore probably does not exist.
Getting very esoteric here because I don't quite understand your connotation, your concept that you can't have free will in living in the moment. How I mean, it's semantics then. How do you explain that? All right, so it's an origin story because we don't know. In our origin story, there was the mass chaos of all this energy all over the place. You could say, I mean, it really is analogous to like a pre-Big Bang thing. And then in our storytelling, Hashem separated the heavens from the earth, and some things were in gas, and some things you couldn't see, and some things were solid. And then he created life there. And then the life had to get along. So the life wakes up, human being, you know, using these allegories, in this Garden of Eden, and basically says, here's a playground and let's have fun together, but don't do these two things. And then Eve, and then surely not die, surely not die. What did that mean? They had to weigh things. I don't know how you measure the exact moment. Something was happening in that moment, and it's happening again today. To that degree, maybe that's why we say we're all Adam and Eve trying to make up and get back to the Garden of Eden. So we get to that nirvana, that, you know, that place where we're totally satisfied, always happy, and nobody hurts anybody else. And we're not afraid to die. And then, you know, so that's what I mean by free will. Or are you just saying that even Hashem foresaw that? Hashem foresaw that Adam and Eve were going to break the rules, and then they'll have no choice but to cast them out? I don't know. I mean, to some degree, I guess we have to start with some foundation of what we're going to assume as the baseline, which again takes us back to that same old chicken or egg thing, because, you know, these are not.
It always has to be living in the present. It can't be anything other.
But I don't see how that means there can't be the notion of human. Well, will isn't the right word. What's the word I want? Human action, human, that we're not just puppets here, you know, that we can turn to the left or to the right. We can get off the straight and narrow. That's what I mean by having free will. How else can you describe that?
I think this comes down to, it doesn't matter whether you believe in free choice or not. What matters is what happens after it, which is personal responsibility. And if you choose to take on personal responsibility, and we really don't even have a choice about that even, because if you choose not to, you can still go to prison because you did something wrong. So the responsibility is the most important part of this. It's not the whatever this nebulous thing is of free choice, free will. Being responsible for your actions, basically.
So actually, so this, I want to keep reading because I want to get to those lines that come in the aftermath of the Ve'ahavta, and then have a little discussion about why those lines are eliminated from some of the Machzurim, and we don't actually read them out loud. So it will add to the discussion. I think we were on Oh, Alan knows. Thank you, Alan. We're at 10:01. Okay, anybody wants to read?
I'll read.
And welcome, Sarah. I saw Sarah join meanwhile. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're still quotes. That means Moshe is still talking. At that time, the Lord said to me, carve you 2 stone tablets like the first ones and come up to me on the mountain, and you shall make you a wooden ark, that I may write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you smashed, and you shall place them in the ark. And I made an ark of acacia wood, and I carved 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I went up the mountain, 2 tablets in my hand. Bye, Heather. Thank you. And he wrote on the tablets like the first writing, the 10 words that the Lord has spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly. And the Lord gave them to me. And I turned and came down from the mountain, and I put the tablets in the ark that I had made, and they were there as the Lord had charged me. And the Israelites journeyed onward from Berot Ben Yakan to Moserah. And then Aaron died, and he was buried there. And Eleazar, his son, served as priest in his stead. From there they journeyed on to Gudgod, and from Gudgod to Jotbath, a land of brooks of water. At the time, the Lord divided off the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the Lord's covenant, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless his name until this day. Therefore, Levi has had no portion and estate with his brothers. The Lord is his estate, as the Lord your God had spoken to him. As for me, I stood on the mountain as on the first days, 40 days and 40 nights. And the Lord heard me that time too. He did not want to bring ruin upon you. And the Lord said to me, rise, go upon the journey before the people, that they may come and take hold of the land that I swore to their fathers to give to them. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, and to worship the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your being, to keep the Lord's commandments and his statutes that I charge you today for your own good. Look, the Lord your God's are the heavens and the heavens beyond the heavens, and the earth and all that is in it. Only your fathers did the Lord desire to love them. And he chose their seed after them, chose you from all the people as on this day. And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, nor shall you show a stiff neck anymore. For the Lord your God, he is the God of gods and the master of masters, and the great and mighty and fearsome God, who shows no favor and takes no bribe, doing justice for orphan and widow, and loving the sojourner to give him bread and cloak. And you shall love the sojourner, for sojourners you were in the land of Egypt. The Lord your God, you shall fear him, you shall worship him, and to him you shall cleave, and in his name you shall swear. He is your praise, and he is your God, who did with you these great and fearsome things that your eyes have seen. With 70 persons did your fathers go down to Egypt, and now the Lord your God has set you like the stars of the heavens for the multitude. And you shall love the Lord your God and keep his watch and his statutes and his laws and his commands for all time. And you shall know today that it is not with your sons who did not know and did not see the Lord your God's chastisement, his greatness, his strong hand and his outstretched arm, and his signs and his deeds that he did in the midst of Egypt to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to all his land. And that he did to Egypt's force, its horses and chariots, when he made the waters of the Sea of Reeds flood over their faces as they pursued after them, and the Lord made them perish to this day. And that he did for you in the wilderness until you came to this place. And that he did to Dathan and to Abiram, the sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth gaped open with its mouth and swallowed them and their households and their tents and everything existing that was at their feet in the midst of all Israel. Oops, you skipped one. Back. You flipped 2, Alan. Can you go back? And he did to Egypt's forces. Oh no, okay. For your own eyes have seen the Lord's great deed that he has done. And you shall keep all the command which I charge you today, so that you may be strong and come and take hold of the land into which you are about to cross to take hold of it, so that you may long endure on the soil that the Lord your God swore to your fathers to give them and to their seed, a land flowing with milk and honey. God, one whole book and one whole sentence without hardly a comma.
I was saying, thank you, Ellen, you were reading my mind. That's exactly where I wanted to stop. Because we're getting to the lines that, that this parasha is famous for. But, okay, so the word lema'an in Hebrew is a very important word. It means so that.
Or therefore.
No, therefore would be more alken. It's not a teaching. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep my theme of future orientation, which is what the beauty of all this is. It's a future orientation. It's not, there's admonishments for the past, and there's reminders, the visual of the 70 who went down, and now the multitudes like the stars in the sky. This is visual. It's a lot of reminders. The next chunk we're going to read is kind of where, to me, it's leading to, because there's always been controversy about lines that are included and not. The editorializing that's given reasons. And, there's an aspect of being apologetic for some of these words that we're reading now, which is very hard for me to get away from too, especially in the light of the world we're living in right now. I don't want to be an apologist, and I want to believe that I'm right and the people who are doing horrible things to other people are wrong. But they're reading the same document I'm reading, and how is it that they're coming to such different conclusions? I mean, that's what keeps me coming back year after year. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm looking to understand the world I'm living in. So I highlighted for me a line that I wanted to go back to, and Ellen, it's fine that you go back because you're so good at it, but it's it's chapter 10, line 12 and 13. And now, O Israel, okay, I'm gonna wait. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways. What are all his ways? And to love him, and to worship the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your being. How much is that? Is that something we can measure? Is there an end to all? Is there like all means you've checked off all the boxes and now you're done? I don't think so. Okay, and then line 13. To keep the Lord's commands and his statutes that I charge you today for your own good. Ah, there it is, for your own good. Okay, to me, that gives a huge context. There's a future orientation right there. First of all, we have no idea what the allness of it all is. We don't even know what it means to do something wholeheartedly. Is there such a concept? But the why of it, so for your own good. It says, look, the Lord your God, it's the heaven and the earth exist beyond you. All of it exists even if humans are not there to enjoy it, control it, whatever. It still exists. It's that thing of where we are in all that continuum that I'm interested in. And I can't understand it without understanding the imperative of the future orientation. That's the context that makes me feel okay reading some troublesome words here.
Well, I just have to say again, because we are mortal, what else can we do but look at it as being part of a continuum, which implies implies that something's going to come after. The question is, what is coming after? Is it coming after building upon what we're doing? Is it working in the service of having that relationship with Hashem that we crave, that Hashem presumably craves back with us, because it is a two-way street? Yeah, so yeah, I agree with you, Aviva, but and yet
So
there
when-
there it is again. I'm getting a headache from all this because I know how I can be and wordy and all that with everybody here, and I appreciate how well everybody listens. And these are just we all know these are really hard concepts to grapple with, and there's a lot of dichotomies, and then there's a lot of things about what words mean to us between, for example, what is free will or whatever. So it's really tough, but that's where the good stuff is too, I guess.
I mean, okay, if I'm gone tomorrow, the sun is still going to shine. Right? But in the time that I'm here, I could be party to the kind of damage that could mean that just the sun shining could be a damaging experience. The finely tuned world that we live in can be altered by humans. We know it can be altered by God. We've read those stories. We rush through them. All those horrible stories of destruction, they are but this much in the greater context of the Tanakh that we read. God can do it like that. But we humans, we still have the ability to cause destruction, not in that same profound way. I mean, we're not God, but we do possess that. That's our similarity. We possess that ability to, let's just focus on the sun. We can use the sun for good. We know a lot of things about the sun that are good. We know that exposure to the sun elevates our mood. We know that we can use sun for energy. There's so much good, but we also have the awareness that some ways in which we live our lives for our own immediate gratification can cause the sun to be very harmful. Only to us? Or to those less fortunate who don't have the ability to go into a factory and create a big, huge sunshade to put over them. We're responsible for those people too. We're not God. No, go ahead, Ruth Ellen, sorry.
Something just came to me when we just read that passage, the God and all God's heavens and earth will be here. And the climatologists and climate people, they say the same thing. The earth will survive, but in a different form. It survived after the asteroid that took out so all of a sudden it is sort of a solipsistic inward looking way to think about it, because we're talking in the context of the continuation of life, especially human conscious life as we know it's continuing. And that's the whole point. Like God destroyed everything in the flood, he could have destroyed everything altogether. That's why I don't know how to say it, and it sounds like I'm being blasphemous or whatever. We couldn't have these stories without human beings trying to understand and answer these questions, because we can always be gone tomorrow. So again, I got to go back to what holds us all back is this whole fear of the unknown and mortality, because sometimes when people think, how can somebody be a martyr, or how can they care about something more beyond themselves? I would say that they were more evolved souls, because one way or another, they're not going to continue in this body. But yet the fact that the earth was created out of the chaos, that's the other term that came to me, was the notion of creating an order to get to these lower levels of vibration and I talk about the organizations to make single cell things, and then to create an organization. What is an organ? A unit of individual parts working together for some greater good or some greater goal. And that keeps moving up the chain. And that's what we've evolved into. And it seems like a devolution to go away from that. if we go away from that, or even as we are evolving, things are going to change and a new equilibrium will have to form. And that in some way could be thought of as a partnership between God, the heavens, the universe, and humanity, to the degree that humanity doesn't recognize that and makes decisions that are very short-sighted. It's going to be a lot messier place, and there's going to be a lot more disorder before some new equilibrium comes along.
I think this whole idea of God is just, I think he was just trying to put people together. I don't even know, like, where is God? I don't like,
in everything, right?
The older I get, yeah, well, I mean, but it's sort of like God did this and God told us that and God did blah, blah, blah. And mankind is as shitty as they ever were. And people are just as horrible as they ever were. And so where is this God? Where is this thing that we think of as a living, moving entity that's telling us something? You're talking about free will. I'm not so sure about it because, I just think, Moses had to put people together like a government, like a people. So if we think of it in that way, it's just a made up thing that you don't know what it is or where it is or what any of it even exists, really. Uh, I mean, I know there's arguments against it, and I go with that too, but I'm just playing the other side of it, that where is the justice in all this? Say we have free will. I don't feel like I have any free. If I had any kind of free will, that I would. I don't know. I mean, you could also say that the choices that I've made were predestined and I would have made them anyway. And it's easy to say that.
And here again, I think we're getting into a quagmire because we're talking about the impact of a whole organism or group of people, to Alan's point too. Well, we just keep into this cycle and we do the same things over and over again, but then there's always faith, there's always hope, and not everybody is bad. And some people are trying harder, and the different concepts, again, the constructs that human beings have formed. I learned this from my husband too. The whole idea of the temple being rebuilt, us returning to Garden of Eden, is the idea that there's still always the hope that by our own actions moving forward, even though we can't see it, and ultimately when you talk about how with all your heart, these are aspirational, because it's like the idea of infinity. It's something you can't measure. It's so great, it's so awesome and overpowering, but it's something, and so that's something, and that hope is always out there. And then in the Hindu tradition, the way my husband explains some of these different cycles that humanity goes through, at some point everybody gets on the bandwagon, to the equivalent of everybody following God's ways and walking and loving him. And so a nirvana will come, because if we wait long enough, that'll just happen by the natural progression of more and more people getting on the bandwagon. And then the other people trying to move that along a little bit when they see all the suffering through their own way, by having and some of those ways, unfortunately, are individuals trying to be God. And that's what we run into a problem there. And again, the proof should be in the results. How do we know a false prophet from a real prophet? I mean, but somehow, maybe partly it's human nature, because we want to avoid pain. So we look for answers, and we look to false gods sometimes, in the hope, with that ever aspiring hope. Well, maybe this is the real thing, But unfortunately, it takes time, work, energy, and attention to critically review what is legitimate and what is not. And unfortunately, it does seem at this point, to the degree there is free will on the individual level, it's going to take a long time for a critical mass of people to all see the same light, so to speak,
So what's the earliest instance that you can think of where God lost credibility in the eyes of humans? all the way back to the Garden
I
of
don't know.
Eden.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Wait,
when he
wait,
led
hold on.
Cain, when Cain.
It's a rhetorical question. I'm
Oh.
going to answer it. Okay.
Yes, right.
All the way back to where God says, you can eat all these
All these
wonderful
things.
things in this garden, but not this one tree. And the words are, on the day that you will eat from this tree, you will surely die.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
did God lose credibility right there and then? Okay.
Yeah, any parent knows about fake threats.
Okay, so this
Well,
idea.
that doesn't necessarily mean die. What are you saying? Die physically? No.
Well, okay, so
Some kind of spiritual death, I think it means, not physical.
sure. I mean,
Obvious.
without what you're saying, all of this is meaningless, of course. But in biblical speak, mot yumat, that doubling of you will surely die, is very significant. So if we think of it really being a beginning and humans being new to the world and God being new to having created humans and everybody in this sort of infancy, let's figure this all out together and we'll grow together. And, if we want to look at that model, then yes, surely God lost some legitimacy right there. Okay. And
Why? Because he didn't kill us?
it says you shall sure on the day that you eat, you shall surely die. So then Sarah brings up the reasonable intellectual conversation about this, because it clearly doesn't mean physical, because everywhere else we have examples of things being written and they don't mean that exactly literally. And so as Sarah is pointing out, that means a certain amount of spiritual.
But to your argument, I think you left out one important thing, because there were the two trees. We could say that because God loved people so much, the good and evil, they ate from the first tree, and that was like a warning. Before they could eat from the second tree, he cast them out so they wouldn't die. Now, maybe for better or for worse. And there again, what is that? That serves us because it tells us why we're still here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm not trying to gloss over. I'm just trying to make if we want to look at these points, right? So clearly what I'm saying is it's a clear message to not look at the oversimplification. Okay. And now here we are at the end of the journey, about when God deems the Israelites ready to cross over. That's where we're at right now, physically. We have all the reminders of the places along the way and all the reminders of the events along the way. Sure, with a little interpretation from Moses, but still the idea is that the relationship between humans and God is age old, and it's not static. It never was static, right? So sometimes God needs to remind the Israelites in just generalities, like, oh, I'm the God who brought you out of Egypt with an outstretched arm and a mighty hand, or whatever the terminology is in English, right? But sometimes it's just very visual. You were once 70 and now you're so numerous, nobody can count you, supposedly. These are images. So the relationship is what has always been. And the measure of readiness to enter into the land is, what do you know now? What happens when you enter the land? It could be immediate destruction. You're going to encounter giants who could, overrun you in a day, or you can overrun them in a day. And then what? Where's the future in it? Like, that's the point. That I don't understand any of this without the concept of the future, which is what really is where we read Torah in our day. At any time, what's the word in the Haggadah? Ki bechol dor vador omdim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation, there are those who wish to destroy us. There's never going to be a time when there aren't. But what if those who wish to destroy us actually really wished to just live and provide a good opportunity for their own children? Do we have something in common with those others?
Well, it matters if you take on a win-win sustainable approach or a zero sum. Because if it's a zero sum game, then you don't. That's a disaster for one side.
Yeah. for sure.
Right. And even if at a given moment you feel like you're winning, you're not. Because you have to build that fence around your property. Because now the people that supposedly you could coexist with are your, I won't use the term enemy, they don't have your best interest in mind.
No, but we've got
But you didn't have their best interest
have to
in
build
mind
the
either. On the other side, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know.
We have
I
the
didn't hear what you-
metaphors in Hawaii that we have to build the fence to keep the pigs out.
I mean, it's screwed up, I'll tell you.
Pigs are
You
not in
know,
the same category. They were not created in the image of God. That's why they're not created in the image of God. Are we going to slaughter all the pigs and let them fester in the fields, or are we just keeping them from encroaching into the land that we may find useful to feed ourselves? Right?
Well, that's good.
That gets more complex. So I like to keep it on the human level. That's just my preference.
That's what I was going to say. I keep coming back to what I think Craig was trying to get at, because he's newer here, and you can see you said because he's a lawyer. Craig, if you're there, I hope you're still listening. You know, the whole notion of making God more human-like, that is, with foibles and the anger and not controlling the anger and all that, and then we're charged to treat the stranger as, you know, our neighbor as ourselves and all that, and yet there are all these examples, which again, I think brings in the idea of what is the obligation, role, responsibility, and ability of human beings to take action. I'm trying not to use the word free will, because there are times in the Bible where some of the actors and players were so evil, were so bad, they were not one of the kind 20 men that would have been still existed. They had to be cut out for the good of the whole and for the good of the future to go on, you know? And they talked about that when the rebellion against Moses were sucked up. I was just sitting here thinking, boy, wouldn't it really be nice if the leaders in power who are greedy and not leading from the heart and all that, if they were just good old biblical sucked up into the earth, and we could start get a reset, you know?
Well, when you bring up greed, right, there's a certain self-centeredness in humans, and what the Jews should do, as opposed to people of other lands who are not, really discussed other than as obstacles in a way. And so it's just that's sort of what strikes me. And the whole pig reference, I'm new to Hawaii, new to this Torah study too, but I did, on my way back from the gym, see an unfortunate pig that had gotten on the queen and met his, right? And so maybe that building the fence for the pig is protection for the pig too. You know what I mean? So I just think about, what do they say? Good fences make good neighbors. And the humanity of God and getting angry, yeah, I still do struggle with that.
I mean, I almost say that in the context of, are there some players, actors who are so evil, or acting with such malevolence, that they aren't entitled to be treated with the kindness we're supposed to show the other, you know? And that's a big dichotomy. And I think that's a big part, and we don't want to get political, but it is, that this is the moral distress that so many Jews, I'm sure you can imagine, you, Aviva, can't sleep, you know, Jews in the diaspora, Jews who Zionists or not, or Israel, you know, all of us, it's just, we're seeing we're being torn in these two different directions. And
Okay, so actually, let's, I want to hear from Craig about this. Are there some things that are so horrible that people must be taken out of society for or killed for? Like, because as part of this, like the allness of all these mitzvot and all these teachings that we're supposed to adhere to is an entire legal system. So Craig, are there some things that are so beyond that they must be punished because they are a threat to society?
Absolutely. And some people need to be isolated for that very reason. And it comes down to whether certain groups of people could ever be compatible. Take Jews and Muslims, okay? Muhammad started a religion to fight the Jews and destroy the Jews, and he did a good job of it, the Battle of Qurayza. And Hamas has as part of its charter, or the Quran says there's a Jew behind a rock, go kill him. So do we need fences? Do we need a separation? Can these people ever get along, or should they always be separated? And the other thing that comes to mind with this parsha is the concept of friendship, right? Who can we be friends with? And who can we have a loving relationship with? And God, we want to have a loving relationship with you, Hashem. Is it a friendship? But it always seems that you're the alpha, you're dominant, and is it truly any kind of equal relationship? You know, those are the ones that work best. It seems to me in marriage or otherwise, when you have some equality and shared values, but otherwise, some people just shouldn't be together, right?
So I agree with all what you're saying. I have no disagreement, but I wanted to dwell on this legal aspect. Ruth Ellen asked a simple question. Are there some things that are so horrible that fill in the blank, right? So that's the difference between murder and kill. That's the whole idea, the whole concept of an entire legal system that's actually quite well spelled out, and in its simplicity implies a complexity that says you get no way out. There's no binaryism to lean into. Nope. So that's why the difference between killing and murder both cause the end of a life. Are they the same because of that?
No, because you have a mens rea and an actus reus. You have
Right.
the act, the killing. What was the thought? What was the intent?
Exactly. So in our Torah, extended to the Western legal system, are such concepts as that, well, for example, the concept of cities of refuge. So there is a difference. If you inadvertently caused someone's death, but it was not murder, because in your heart you didn't intend to do it, that is very different from killing. But yet, on the other hand, even if you killed somebody unintentionally, but you're likely to do it again, what's the obligation of society? So say you drink alcohol and you get in the car and you kill somebody. That's not murder. You didn't mean to do it, but still you could do it again, because the reason that that happened is something that's repeatable. So society says, we're taking you out of circulation. You're too dangerous. Now, what's society's obligation to the individual? Offering ways to repent, to make it right, right? There's like, we're not like done. We're not dead because we inadvertently killed somebody. Some people would like that to be that way, because it says, if you killed someone, clearly it's in your genes. So off with you. But then what's the danger of that? Then we can extend that and say, and anybody who looks like you, or who speaks like you, or who has the same parents as you, and then where does it end, right? So the laws are very specific. They look simple, but they're not. You don't get by with the simplicity. Sorry. So the legal system is very complex. And Craig, I think that you understand why, the adversity toward your profession comes from a place where sometimes lawyers are so good at what they do as to seem to the general public like they've lost the point. Right? You can legally absolve somebody of a crime, but can you ethically? Because being a slick lawyer is something that some people do exceedingly well. And some lawyers that we revere them because of their success in defending what we all know is indefensible. But they're good at what they do. They take their profession seriously. They know it down to the dots and the commas and the pauses and the everything. But if you lose the point of it all, the allness of it all, whatever for? Do you need it? What purpose does it serve in society? So that's the allness. And if you obey all my, and you heed and you whatever, right? It's all of it. You can't pick and choose. Lawyers can pick and choose. They can make a lot of money by being really good with the details.
Right, but lawyers don't get to make the ultimate call. They're advocates, and then we're talking about judges and juries, which are supposed to be objective. And when we talk about morality or religion, we're talking about murder, etc. But what's in the news quite a bit, and which is the most heinous crime, at least in my lifetime, and even in prisons, it's not good to have committed this crime, is sexual assault against a child. Any crime against a child is horrific. And that's why this Epstein thing is dominating. It's almost biblical, because you think about the morality and the cover-ups, but at its essence, it's a crime that most of society has said, no, we don't have that. Although the rules about that have changed through historical times. But yeah, I've thought a lot about who needs to be isolated, who doesn't. And there are clearly people who are too dangerous. And yeah, thought about it a lot.
And we're one more thing, Ruth Ellen, before we move on to you, because shoot, I might have forgotten in just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'll have to take a note. Go ahead.
Yeah, I might wait. I have to stop for a second. Oh, so I have to come back with the idea of creating organization, some sort of equilibrium while we're living on this earth, and order. And what came back to it biblically was Yitro getting Abraham Moshe to create the judiciary, but it was the top people, the best people. So the one big word, of course, to the degree that human beings have to carry out, perhaps hopefully in a godlike, following the rules manner, you have to have trust and honor. And so then we get to the point that this corruption is such that you can't even count on the people put in the position to make the decisions before, that these advocates go before, the judges and whatever, when that has all become corrupted. And it doesn't leave us very many places to go. But I don't know how we get back to that point, except to some degree to say, if you love your God, walk humbly with your God. And it's right there in black and white. If all those ifs happened on a big enough mass of people that it was the majority and not just the few, that relatively 20% that had to be thrown into the pits at Mount Sinai, we could get along, and we could make this organization and work on earth and with a level of equilibrium that relieved a lot of people and other organisms of a lot of pain and let them get on with their lives. So I don't quite know.
Okay, I remember Craig said, Craig used the term, it's biblical. You know what else always strikes me as biblical? Some of the greatest speeches of the greatest democracy of the world. That so could be. Okay, everybody name one famous speech from the US history, just one. And you say the name of the speech, we'll all kind of nod and say we know.
We're gonna go Gettysburg Address.
Okay,
I have a dream.
Washington's farewell address.
yes, I have a dream, Alan says.
Well,
Okay,
Ask not what your
well,
country
you,
can do for you, ask what you can do for your
Yeah.
country.
Mhm.
yeah. How about FDR's speech that they just played on the radio?
we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Well, no, I wasn't, that's a good one too, but I was thinking more about the Social Security,
Social
right? This is
Security.
like the
Oh.
anniversary of Social Security. The idea that the circumstances of your birth should not dictate your access to a good life, right? All of these are biblical to me. I mean, the I have a dream speech, wow,
Okay.
you know.
Well, of course, all the people who wrote them have, I mean, Lincoln, Washington, whatever. I mean, they all had deep faith in
Right.
and
But not
they
just
were
faith.
scholars of the Bible too.
Right. So they did not have fear of God in that if I don't do this or say this, God will strike me dead. They're biblical in that greater way, in that understanding, right? And so I just read Doris Kearns Goodwin's book about her husband's career. He was Richard Goodwin, and he was one of the speechwriters for, I think he started with Johnson. No, Kennedy.
Kennedy, yeah.
Kennedy, and then continued with Johnson. So, and I listened to some of those speeches. I'm like, okay, I know where he gets this from. I can find the line and verse, right? So what Craig is saying, there is something when you say biblical, Craig, you say it with a passion that leads me to believe that you're saying these are things that all people should agree on. They're that important. We say they're biblical. And that is exactly what my understanding is. There is something in the one culture's logbook assembled over a period of time and then deemed ready for press, saying these cover some of the most important things. There's more, but if we stop here, it's good enough, because we can't account for everything. We can't account for who you are at the time you're reading it, how much you'll change over time, how much the world will change over time. But I can guarantee that if you go back and study it, this idea of what the first time you say, what does all mean? I don't understand this concept of all. But over time, as the world dishes you situations you might rather not see, you begin to understand what it all means. Okay, the term genocide is only a word that existed from, I think, 1948. The term was coined. It implies a lot. Genocide implies a lot, but legally, it is really tough. So I'm saying this for Craig in case you have anything to input here, but legally, genocide is tough because it was defined at a time in reaction to something. It is so specific that it's a great discussion, but legally it doesn't hold as much water as we wish it did. Lots of countries.
I mean, there have been definitions.
I really want to hear what you say, but you're frozen.
By
Craig.
a lot of Jews trying to reconcile. I'm sorry.
No, wait, let's all be quiet for a minute because Craig, we lost you. You froze. So start again.
Okay. No, I was talking about this powerful word genocide that Jews, I think, helped formulate to try to come to a reckoning about what had just happened in the Holocaust. And there were certain definitions put to it, including mass murder and forced, starving. So it is impactful that a lot of Jewish organizations, a lot of Israeli organizations have started to call this more than a war crime, and it's genocide. And I don't want to devolve into the politics, but I'll get back to my background, my first 16 years as a prosecutor, and you open up the Colorado statute book, and I'm sure it's similar in any state. You have crimes against persons, number one of which is murder, that of course comes from the Ten Commandments. Then you have crimes against property, which includes the concept of theft and forgery and all the other things that we also know come from the Ten Commandments. And then there's inchoate crimes that allow you to prosecute people for conspiracies, attempts, solicitation, and things short of a crime. So these kind of come from the Bible. And of course, there's a lot of death penalty discussion in the Bible, and that's the most severe of things that societies keep trying to reckon with, various states, various countries. So yeah, we get a lot of it, and there's a great textbook. I was trying to find it and put it on the chat. Just regardless of your religiosity, the impact of scriptures on Western civilization is profound. And of course, in the law, it's all over the place. Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you. The even the things that seem more problematic in today's age, like laws against damage to property, they're biblical, very specifically. Like there's even delineation of what you owe somebody if you borrowed their donkey and it, got sick. Like it's very, very specific, right? So the understanding of it, you take how we understand it in our country, which what makes our country very unique is I'm going to choose one aspect. There are lots. Is the multiculturalism. You take some of these same things and you put them in a country like Norway, which we uphold as the great, like socialist country, it provides for all its citizens, or Japan, maybe less so today, but countries where they have not dealt with some of the multiculturalism and accounting for the fact that people can be so different in their approach to life and death, legal matters, so many things. And we say in our country, what these laws mean is something very specific. And yet we can also not all agree on them. But they are very specific. And so back to, and again, I'm not trying to do politics. We allowed it to happen one time. We learned our lesson. Talking directly about the news of the world around us on Shabbat is distracting because we can get to the depth without doing that as well. So going back to the concept of genocide, again, do we need to get to the bottom last word of it to say, oh, we checked all the boxes, clearly genocide? No, we all know that the intention and the thought of some people is exactly that, to get rid of. So now, does genocide only count if you succeeded in killing the 6 million people? Or was the idea that you've stated this, you've laid out the plans, you've built the weapons, you don't have to wait till the 6 million are killed again, ever again, to call it genocide. If you see what's happening, what's the term? If it walks like a duck, right? So that's where the problem with it, a lawyer can disavow a jury of the notion that it's genocide.
Well, maybe, but I think we're trying to say it's not.
And I'm not specifically talking about Gaza, by the way, because the cases that are genocide cases that are argued around the world right now have been long before the Gaza situation. So I'm not specifically speaking about Gaza.
But for any crime, take theft, okay? And if I were to come to your home and walk off with one of your candlesticks, it's like, oh my God, but do I have an intent to permanently deprive you of that? And you have to prove an intent was in an accident or, so even with a crime like that, all crimes are, including genocide, are like a recipe. You have, if you're going to make a chocolate cake, do you have the sugar, the flour? Do you have the oven? Do you have the pan? Then you have an inchoate cake. And then if you complete it, you have a cake. Genocide we have assigned certain elements to it. And then in a criminal context, if I were accused of taking your candle holders, you'd have to prove that I had an intent to permanently deprive you. And you'd have to prove it in America beyond a reasonable doubt, because we give the benefit to the accused. So it is a harsh thing to say somebody's committing genocide. And I agree with you, it's not on all of Israel, although that's interesting. How much are citizens responsible for their government? But the leaders of Israel, if they were to be put on trial, you probably have to prove 4 elements. When did this happen? Why did this happen? Did it really happen? And then you might come to the horrible conclusion, yeah, it is a genocide. And, or yes, this was first-degree murder. Jury, I always told the jury, you're not going to be pleased. It's not going to make you feel good to say this man murdered somebody. We understand it's a tough decision, a tough call. The juries make it. And I just don't think it's quite as complicated. You may come up short in your proof, but even for the worst crimes, it's just a matter of putting together the recipe. Do you have it or don't you?
Or making up a recipe.
Yeah, if you're just making up new laws, that's like an ex post.
I'm gonna put in the chat a pretty long podcast I listened to, but well, I'll put the name of this guy, and if people want to pursue this particular thing, and again, with no intention of it being directly talking about Gaza, the concept of a word that was created to try to encompass something so large, and yet how, as humans, we have the ability to sort of like qualify it in such a way when we all know that it's a bigger issue, and that the legal system is not necessarily the best. It takes our humanity away from us by saying, well, if the legal system found that it's not, then we can all rest easy and continue going about our business. So I'll put this name in the chat and people can Google him. And okay.
Just real quick,
Oh,
since you mentioned this chat, I just put in the link to the chat to the Rabbi Sachs I read this week. And it was the same one that you did. Because we've had so many different concepts here. I like the idea when he talks about the role of love here that we haven't gotten to, but it goes to Craig's point about this God forgiving, is he angry, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about the notion that it's love and justice. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about, he shed some light on. I think it's really good. Even Yehuda probably already read it, but I recommend you click on it and read it for 5 minutes. Well, this stuff is still on your mind when we're done. Okay, that's all I want to say.
okay. All right, so let's get to those very important words that we like to read out loud. That's on our Saturday Machzor. I don't know, who wants to read? Not Alan. Save your voice, Alan. Yehuda, you want to read a little bit? You're muted, by the way. There you go.
For the land into which you are coming to take hold of it is not like the land of Egypt from which you went out, where you sow your seed and water it with your foot like a garden of greens. But the land into which you are crossing to take hold of it is a land of mountains and valleys. From the rain of the heavens you will drink water, a land which the Lord, my God, thy God, cares for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. And it shall be, if you indeed heed my commands, with which I charge you today, to love the Lord your God, and to worship him with all your heart and with all your being. I will give the rain of your land in its season, early rains and late, and you shall gather it in your grain and your wine and your oil. And I will give grass in your field to your beast, and you shall eat and be sated. Watch yourself, lest your heart be seduced, and you swerve and worship other gods and bow to them. And the Lord's wrath flare against you, and he hold back the heavens, and there be no rain, and the soil not give its yield, and you perish swiftly from the goodly land that the Lord is about to give you. And you shall set these my words on your heart and in your very being, and you shall bind them for a sign on your hands, and they shall become circlets between your eyes. And you shall reach them, and you shall teach them to your sons, to speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the way, and when you lie down, and when you arise. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and in your gates, so that your days may be many in the days of your sons, on the soil that the Lord swore to your fathers to give to them, as the days of the heavens over the earth. For if you indeed keep all this command, which I charge you to do it, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave to him, the Lord will dispossess nations greater and mightier than you. Every place where the sole of your foot treads, yours will be, from the wilderness and the Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates River, and as far as the hinder sea, this will be your territory. No man will stand before you. Your fear and your dread, the Lord your God will set over the face of the land in which you tread, as he has spoken to you. Notice the women aren't included in that because they already know the stuff.
Okay, so those lines starting on line starting on line 13 are a paragraph that in some prayer books are included and in some are not included. And there's always been great controversy about them not being included. And I think it was the Reform movement that took those lines out right after the Vahavta. And the reasoning being that this gives too much credit to God. It says, blindly follow God's commands and then you'll get the rain. That's how it was looked upon. It's like, all you got to do is blindly follow this, that, and the other, and then everything else will work out. And that was considered contrary to human accountability and taking action and social responsibility. And I look at that in this day and I think, whoever read it that way? Like, how could, only if you had an agenda could you understand that to be, especially, and now I'm going to read something completely different. Story time. I'm going to read to you from Rabbi Arthur Waskow, an interpretive translation of that paragraph. So Rabbi Arthur Waskow, if anybody has any of his books, I don't know which movement he was associated with, but he's sort of like responsible for bringing Judaism back into joyful celebration in the home and making Jews feel not alienated from the joy of being Jewish. Okay, so if you listen, you really listen to the teachings of Adonai, the breath of life, especially to the teachings that there is unity in the world and interconnection among all its parts, when the rains will fall as they should, the rivers will run, the heavens will smile, and the good earth and all its creatures will feed you and feed each other. You can tell a product of the time of approximately what decade this was written. But if you shatter the harmony of life, if you chop the world into parts and choose one or more of these parts to idolize, such as the god of wealth or the god of greed or the addition to make the produce without pausing to be and rest, then the breath of life will come as a hurricane to shatter your harmony. For if you pour poison into the earth and air and water, then it will be poison that you eat and drink and breathe. The rain won't fall, or it will turn into acid rain when it does. The rivers won't run, or they will overflow, because if you have no earth where the rain can soak in, and the heavens themselves will become your enemy. The ozone layer will no longer shield you. The carbon dioxide you pour into the air will scorch your planet, and you will perish from off the good earth that the breath of life gives you. The breath of life is capitalized, as in a different word for God, the breath of life. Therefore, set these words in your heart, and in every breath, carry them in every act towards which you put your hands, and make them the pattern through which you see the world. Teach them to your children, to repeat to their children. Stay aware of them when you are at home and when you travel, when you lie down to dream, and when you rise up to act. Write them on the thresholds, write them on the doorposts of your house and of your city gates, so that, lema'an, so that your days and the days of your children grow more, grow deeper, grow higher, grow better upon the earth that the breath of life swore to your ancestors to give them. So that, as Shamayim, which is heaven, is where Esh and Maim, fire and water, meet together and live in peace. So you can make of earth a place where all creatures live together in harmony. The days on earth will be as peaceful as the days of the heavens are. Such a product of its time, but again, in its time, you know, the specific mentions of what were the environmental concerns of the time and the political concerns of the time, you know, I liked it. Well, it was pretty good.
If you said I missed it, when did he write that?
I didn't say. I have that. It's a book, like it's called On the Doorposts of Your Home. You know what? You guys discuss. I'm going to go find the book and find out when it was written. Of course, I could probably Google it.
Right.
Do that.
Well, just put that in, put the link in when you find that, because that sounds like something I'd like to read at my Jewish climate activist group. We're always trying to find. Part of me, I said, oh, is it in the 60s or was it the first Earth Day or something? I mean, there's so many different points in history he could have had that.
I'm wrong about the book. Someone else wrote that book. It's Chaim Stern. I've got all my Jewish sources mixed up in my brain. Okay, I'm just gonna find out. I don't know. He makes it so practical.
Hey, don't worry about it. Are we going to try to finish?
We finished the reading. I think.
Oh, we did? Oh,
We
Yeah.
did.
well, that was the end.
That was it.
Yeah,
Okay.
surely. Oh, I didn't
A big
realize that
comment.
Arthur Waskow is considered one of the leaders, originators of the Jewish renewal movement.
Ah,
Okay.
Yeah.
how do you spell his last name?
Waskow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will find one of his books and put it in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, it's really interesting because I thought I knew who he was and I had him mixed up with somebody else. I'll just put his name. Everybody.
That's all
can
right, we
read it.
got the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So he was reading Torah in his own time, clearly, as well.